So this is, sometimes we end up with patients like this patient was a, can you see my slides? So, like this patient was a young patient and he coded. Initially, he was thought to be having some sort of, poisoning, accidental poisoning or some other causes. We ruled out many other causes. Finally, one of our good junior consultant in cardiology actually picked up a saddle thrombus on echo, bedside echo. And the immediate CT showed us, confirmed the diagnosis where we see a massive saddle embolism with almost no complete cessation cutoffs of pulmonary artery beyond the first primary branches. So once we had a confirmation of the diagnosis, the discussion was made with the heart team and a surgeon, and the decision of pulmonary embolectomy was taken. This was, I believe this was a patient who was referred to one of our general medicine senior consultant. And since patient was in shock and he was in severe metabolic acidosis, we actually had an option of treating him with IV thrombolysis, but with his deteriorating condition and young age, we thought, let's not take a chance that he gets into a cardiac arrest, and we immediately shifted him to the cath lab. There was some evidence of DVT and iliac thrombus as well. So while we were thinking that we will go ahead and do the lysis, we thought that let us place a temporary IVC filter first in place, and then go ahead and put our catheters and do thrombectomy so that nothing more trashes down up to the pulmonary circuit. But having said that, IVC filters are not to be put in acute setting unless there is a thrombus in the IVC or proximal iliacs. And if at all it has to be put, it should be taken out as soon as the work of the filter is over. So this is how we actually, we went ahead and did an angio, and what we find here is we have both the pulmonary arteries are full of thrombus. And then we went ahead, and there are three options. In order to, if you have a massive saddle embolism and if you give an arterial thrombolysis, a venous thrombolysis, what happens is you have to give a large amount of drug which actually goes and into the pulmonary artery, goes into the circulation. But if the forward output is not too good, the amount of drug actually going to the pulmonary artery and acting on the thrombus is minimized. Secondly, because it's a it's a saddle embolism and it's an occlusive clot, the surface area available for the drug to act is reduced. And intuitively, if you can sort of macerate this clot, actually pulverize and macerate this clot, you increase the surface area suddenly, and then the drug acts much faster. And this is what we see in the coronary primary angioplasties also. If you can just pass in a wire, the thrombus starts getting dissolved, even with heparin and body's own plasminogen. So this is what we do. We macerate the clot with a wire, and you can see it. We do it segmentally in the main pulmonary artery, right and left pulmonary artery. And after that, you can see the clot actually, you have a better flow going up to all the three branches of the pulmonary artery, and you can actually then under guidance of fluoroscopy, you can suck out this clot. And these are selective pictures where we have been taking, we have sucked out almost 50% of the clot. And what it does, it immediately improves the hemodynamics many a times, and then increases the surface area for the clot to be lysed. And this reduces the dose of the thrombolytic agent which we have to give. And the thrombolytic agent actually acts more directly on the clot, and it's a much faster and a complete lysis. So what we do here is, after that, we place in two catheters. We use the same pigtail on one side and put a multi-purpose side-orbital catheter on the other pulmonary artery. And we continue with lysis after we have done the thrombectomy. And then after lysing this patient with 2 milligram per hour of Actilyze, which is it is only 40% of the complete dose, which we give just in half an hour or 1 hour in cases of acute PE. Here we have reduced it, and we also started the patient on heparin, and the patient was by the time we actually intuitively took the patient to the cath lab, the patient became quite dyspneic, and he was immediately ventilated in the cath lab. Then he was subsequently, after the procedure, he was shifted to CCU under the care of nephrologist and an intensivist, and he was supported by 2 inotropes, and the TPA was continued, and we could see after on the next recheck angiogram that there was a brisk flow in both the pulmonary arteries, speaking that most of the clot has lysed, and the patient also improved in terms of urine output and acidosis. Now, this is another way and more aggressive way of treating acute pulmonary embolisms where thrombolytic therapy is not contraindicated. If it is contraindicated, then this is probably one of the only way and the safest way, much better than surgical embolectomy to treat these sort of patients. And sometimes when thrombolysis fails, then again, this is the way to go. So one has to decide if things are available. You've got a young patient who's coding, who's got a massive pulmonary embolism, about to be ventilated, better you take this patient and do a more aggressive treatment and treat this patient completely. Now, coming on to the ESC consensus recommendation on acute phase treatment of high-risk pulmonary embolism, it is heparin has a class 1 indication, thrombolytic therapy again has a class 1 indication, and surgical or mechanical thrombectomy also has a class 1 indication and should be done, especially if the thrombolytic therapy has failed or is not initiated. So this was one part, and our patient did well. But then the question was, why did this patient have acute pulmonary embolism? He was a young patient and quite a mobile patient. So whenever we have this, we always do a thrombophilia screening if we have a PE or a DVT in a young patient. And the things we check for is protein C and protein S deficiency, factor V Leiden mutation, antithrombin 3, anticardiolipin antibodies, antiphospholipid antibodies, homocysteine, JAK2 mutation, and what we see very commonly in our practice is MTHFR gene mutation, which is very common in Indian population. So after the 4th day, we sent the samples. The patient developed AKI with worsening renal functions. The pulmonary artery pressures were rechecked, and the patient was extubated on the next day. The lytic therapy was stopped on the day 6, and this would have been actually a sort of a problem if the patient, because the patient was in acute renal shutdown, and the patient had to be dialyzed once on the day 4, and in this because of worsening of renal functions, but eventually the patient started improving. He was switched to oral dabigatran later on once his renal functions improved, and was doing clinically well on follow-up. And the thrombophilia profile did reveal he was positive for protein C and S deficiencies, and mildly positive for hyperhomocystinemia. Then subsequently, his filter was removed after a few months, and this is the process of removal of the filter and the subsequent IVC angiogram. So this, I'll stop here and just to take you through a different approach of treating acute massive pulmonary embolism with cardiogenic shock in patients where thrombolytic therapy is contraindicated or has failed, or also in patients where the patient is about to code, and we think that we may probably do a more reliable procedure and get him out of the problem rather than trying thrombolysis and getting him in a cardiac arrest and then trying to do this procedure. So I'll stop here and open it for discussion.
I think can discuss it for, I think we have Dr. Rajeshekar is there.
Good evening, Ashokan. I think session was running late, I think. No? Yeah, it's a wonderful presentation of interesting case, how a sick patient was managed with intrapulmonary thrombolysis and thrombus aspiration. Many times we find that in these type of massive pulmonary embolism, the inevitable happens unless you have an aggressive strategy like this, which Dr. Khanna has shown. I think these are some simple procedures which most of us can do. So this filter that you retrieved, what filter was this? This filter?
This was a filter from Cook's, which is a retrievable filter. Every time we put a filter is a retrievable filter. After
But I
it
was
has,
seeing in some of the companies, they wrote don't attempt retrieval beyond 2 weeks. Like that, they have written. If at all you want to retrieve, you have to retrieve it within 2 weeks from the date of implantation. After that, you shouldn't retrieve. Is there any such time limit for retrieval of the filter?
no. The time limit is actually up till 1 year. Ideally, we should remove it as early as possible. Anytime between 2 weeks to 3 to 6 months is fine. The only problem is that the filter may get endothelialized. It may prove to be a nidus for subsequent thrombus formation. And sometimes the barbs of the filter can actually perforate the IVC, and it becomes very difficult to take it out safely after that. Otherwise, they can be taken out up till 6 months very safely.
See, you had put in a IVC filter, and then one is filter is there, then second is thrombus is there in the IVC. Would you have liked to go from the jugular approach to do the aspiration rather than go from the femoral approach for aspiration and delivery of this?
It's probably very difficult to get from jugular vein. See, you have to lyse the patient, you are sticking vein here in the neck, and the expertise to actually move the catheters into different segments and branches of pulmonary artery becomes very difficult.
Is there any chance of disturbing the filter when you push catheters through the filter?
No. It's not at all, because there is a lot of this interstrut space between the filter is quite big, and actually we just pass in guide wires, and then over the guide wires we take up the catheters. So there is no chance of displacing the filters or even manipulating the filters while we are doing it.
Another clarification I want is, when we place the filter, most books say to place it below the renal veins. Supposing that segment is having thrombus, do you place the filter above the renal vein also?
Absolutely. You can place the filter above the renal vein. You can almost put it at the level of the IVC-RA junction, provided you can take it out later. These were only previous indications because you did not want the clot to cover the renal veins. That is in case the filter attracts a clot. So that is, if you are below, your renal veins will still have an outflow. Otherwise, if you have a filter above and you have a clot below, you may occlude the renal veins. That is the only logic behind it.
Professor Ganna, 2 questions in the chat post. Do you have time now to discuss, or?
We have just 1 minute, maybe. We are running late.
So the question is, for massive pulmonary embolism, how maximum dose alteplase can be given? Alteplase dose maximum. Second question is, guideline systemic thrombolysis should be given first. And what is the catheter we use for the CDT? Catheter-directed thrombolytic therapy.
Okay, so I can answer the second part. For maximum dose of Actilyze, which we give safely in a patient with pulmonary embolism with a catheter in situ, is 2 to 4 milligram per hour of Actilyze. Now, maximum dose which we give for IV thrombolysis is 100 milligram of Actilyze to be given over half an hour to 1 hour. And there are other thrombolytic agents which can be given as direct upfront, stat therapy, just a single push. Now,
ultrasonic device you are using to pulverize the thrombus, do you have one?
We actually didn't have it in India. Now we have a device called, the POSES Thrombojet device, the AngioJet. But we have the device for coronary and vascular application. We don't have the catheters which are big enough to take care of the pulmonary arteries. It's there with the device company, but they are not approved in India. And they are very costly device. We have used this device many years back, and then this device was actually, had a recall, and now it's back again in the world scene. But it takes a lot of time, and these just putting out and sucking out the thrombus is much better. But the main, I will leave it to Dr. Sudha and Dr. Priya. The main focus of attention here in this case would be high suspicion and early diagnosis. If you miss the diagnosis, you don't save the patient. If you delay diagnosing the patient, you don't save the patient. And if you do not, like Dr. Sudha said, if you do not have a team in place in emergency, you delay that you would intervene by mechanical means, and not give lysis in time, you will lose the patient. So in most of the setting, it will be IV lysis as per the recommendation. So I'll leave it to
Yeah,
Dr. Sudha's comment.
Yeah, in fact, now they have advocated pulmonary embolism response team, which is a multidisciplinary team, which includes the emergency physician, the cardiologist, the intensivist, the surgeon, so that anytime the decision can be taken. Their standard protocol, and that is shown to improve the outcome. And of course, thrombolysis is the first and most advocated line of treatment. But if there's a contraindication, say a patient has been operated recently, some patient is admitted, intracranial bleed is admitted. So if there's no contraindication, still I would advocate IV thrombolysis unless a patient is coding. However, if there's a contraindication, then catheter directed thrombolysis is a good option. And they say it's best to do within 48 hours, but it can be done even up to 2 weeks. One problem, sir, I know Dr. Rajashekar is saying that it's very easy to do, but I think not all cardiologists are doing it. So expertise is one of the limitation in catheter directed thrombolysis. At least this is what I have seen, even in our hospital. Ours is a big hospital, but even there, so expertise is one limitation of this therapy.
So we'll probably have Dr. Priya to start another code for pulmonary embolism response team. So maybe in another few months we'll have another code.
Sure. Yeah. Under your guidance, because we need some interventional cardiologists for that.
Yeah, we'll have many. I mean, it's not that Dr. Rajashekar is saying it's not a very difficult procedure, provided you have the, you're available in the night and you are aggressive.
Procedure is simple. Patient is sick.
Yeah, patient, exactly. Patient is sick, procedure is simple.
So can we have something like a bridge thrombolysis like we have in acute strokes, where while the DSA lab is getting ready and they're getting prepared for the mechanical thrombectomy, we do an IV thrombolysis. Of course, it's the full dose, and then the patient is wheeled into the DSA lab. Is there something like that in PE as well? Can it be done?
There is nothing like that, but it's a good idea. And what you actually mean is there is a definite indication for doing thrombectomy if there is a failed lysis. What you are saying is like you give lysis and then take them to the cath lab and see, if the patient is actually lysing on table, if then it's fine. If it is not lysing, you can take out the clot. That is also a very good idea, and actually it should be explored, especially in very sick patients.
Right.
What will be the risk of bleeding in these patients?
The risk of bleeding with intra-arterial, the risk of bleeding in intra-arterial lysis, catheter-directed lysis is very, very low.
No, intravenous I'm talking about.
Intravenous would be the same risk as we have for all PEs, high-risk PEs. I mean, if you have a high-risk PE, the risk of dying would be more than the risk of major bleeding, and the risk of bleeding is around 1 to 2% with full dose of IV TPA.
Professor Khanna, only thing is IVC filter. Do you think when do you use it in such situation? Unless you have documented thrombus extending into the IVC or.
Yeah, I mean, I normally use it only.
But here, because of the sick patient and not sure about this one, I used it. Otherwise.
Normally, I wouldn't use it, but in this patient, there was a suspicion of a iliac clot, proximal iliac thrombus. We didn't want further embolism, so that's the reason we put it first. Otherwise, normally we don't, because once you are lysing the patient, it will also take care of the DVT.
This is a very interesting case. We had a
so there will be various types of filters. One is jugular filter, then inferior vena cava root filter, and then retrievable, non-retrievable. Which one you mostly prefer?
Always retrievable. The filter
actually. Jugular root or femoral root?
The jugular and the femoral filters are same. Only thing you load it in a different way.
And only thing is if you implant it in femoral, you can to retrieve it from jugular root. That way.
Yeah, it's always
there's otherwise both ways.
So thank you all very much for this session and sparing your time and bearing for being a little late.